Welcome again into the television version of Strategies for Living. I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan. Delighted that you've tuned in. Join with me again for another edition of Strategies. Strategies for Living, well, we're all about helping us live healthier, happier, more peaceful lives in our bodies and our minds and our spirits and our relationships here in the 21st century. And we do that by engaging in important conversations with folks we like to call life strategists each and every time that we do Strategies for Living. We are Strategies for Living, but the question we're going to pose to our life strategist today, Artie Cesario, is what happens when we die? And what has that got to do with living? Artie Cesario is the author, and he's a return life strategist. He's the author of It's All Good and God is at the End, Preparing for a Happy Landing. Welcome back, Artie, to Strategies.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for being our life strategist again. I love your quote. Life begins with an orgasm, and can it really be topped in the end?
From all indications, it is. Life does begin with an orgasm, and
Well, hopefully it does. It may, I hopefully.
Well, I'm hoping that it does, yeah. And, talking with so many people toward the end of their life, it's amazing what happens, and the things that I've been privileged to see is that a lot of times I truly believe they go on to something better.
You're working on a brand new book. We're going to talk about that. You've been with us before. The book is available from Outskirts Press. You can go to outskirtspress.com. You can go to amazon.com. You can go to barnesandnoble.com. And I hope you will. It's all good and God is at the end. Now, this all started, this whole deal with the book, and I'll never forget the first time you and I met. We were eating lunch. We were introduced by a mutual friend. You were in the process of writing this book, and our mutual friend wanted to connect us, and I didn't know you well then, but I doggone near choked on my lettuce because I was eating my salad when I asked you the question, what led you to this book? And you said the greatest moment of my life. I said, what is that? And you said the death of my mother-in-law.
Watching my mother-in-law die.
Watching my mother-in-law die, and I doggone near choked, Artie. So in truth, you and your mother-in-law were very close.
Very close.
It wasn't the typical mother. This isn't a mother-in-law joke, which I thought it was that day.
No, it wasn't. What happened was, like I said, she lived with us for 7 years prior to her passing, and the night that we were talking, very, very seriously, she went into a state of ecstasy, and I had never witnessed that before, never really understood it. Yeah. And I started doing research about ecstasy and just was amazed about the whole process. So obviously she was looking into another realm.
Yeah.
And a realm into another world, another universe. And I just started doing research, and my research led me to studying about Medjugorje, which is occurring at this very day.
Still has been occurring for 30 some odd years.
Right, communications directly from heaven, if you believe that.
Right.
Same thing, Lourdes, Guadalupe.
And the Medjugorje people, they've hooked them up, they've subjected them through the years to all kinds of brain studies, and they've hooked them up, and they've been poked, prodded, hooked up to almost everything.
Well, that's right. In Garabandal in Spain, they actually, while they were in this state of ecstasy, ophthalmologists were placing pins in the eyes of the seers, and there was no blinking, no pain response whatsoever. So
maybe our body isn't as important as we thought after all. Who knows?
Well, I'm a curious kind of guy, and so when I saw that, I went, whoa, I got to find out about this.
Yeah.
And I've always been a writer, so I started becoming a hospice volunteer, and then I started seeing...
This is after your mother-in-law
After my mother-in-law passed away.
Because your curiosity led you.
Sure.
Okay.
So it sounds morbid, but when people say, "Oh, you hospice people are so special," no, not really. Doctors, nurses, anybody that's around the dying on a regular basis, they see commonality in things that are occurring, And sometimes these are supernatural things. And it's like a moth to a flame. These people want to experience this again and again. Now, I'm not, belittling anything that these doctors and nurses do, but a lot of them, they do that because they've had that experience.
One of my earliest guests on Strategies for Living when we started doing authors, I'm talking the radio version,
Right.
was a gentleman by the name of Daniel Brinkley. And I don't know if you know who Daniel is. He's written several best-selling books. But Daniel actually died. Daniel was on the phone, and lightning came through the phone and fried him. He actually died. And after he recovered, he was months and months and months recovering. But after he recovered, he spent, I think he's in the Guinness Book of World Records, if I'm not mistaken, logging the most time at the bedside of hospice patients who passed. You're describing exactly what I'm remembering Daniel say.
Well, it's amazing. People, sometimes they lose the ability to speak at the end of their life, but
Right.
in that period that they're still somewhat lucid, it is just amazing some of the things that they've told me and enlightened me on, and things that are supernatural. I no longer have a faith, I have a knowing. And I know that sounds strange.
What's the difference between the faith and the knowing? There's a pretty big gap there that needs to be bridged, and this book is a bridge.
Well, it's a small. It's not a great literary work of prose. I've had a lot of people call me and say, I read it. I found some mistakes in the book. It's not the best book in the world, but
It's a book of stories.
But it's a book that I
stories.
can relate to, and they always tell me their experience.
Yeah.
And there's commonality in the fact that a lot of times people will, someone will not pass because they're waiting for the birth of a child. Sometimes they won't die waiting for the marriage of a son or a daughter, or waiting for some special occasion. But it's amazing, sometimes while people are there at the bedside of someone dying, they'll have some incredible experience. They'll hear something, or they'll see something, and then the person with them will experience it sometime with them also. Mm-hmm. Recently, I had a man call me and said he woke up, his mother was about to die, and he was sleeping by her bedside, and he woke up and he said there was angelic singing in the room of "Shall We Gather at the River?"
Wow.
And this man was not of that faith, even knew what the song was, and had to do research.
Right.
And he's come to the belief that Jesus is a Baptist by hearing this song, because it's an old Baptist spiritual. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's just amazing. Like I said, there's been situations that I've been with people and they've told me things, and it's like, whoa. And also they've told me secrets that I've never told them that they knew from people that I know that are dead.
Right.
And that goes into the area.
Gets into the psychic stuff. Gets into that.
I'm an insurance agent. I'm not a trained psychologist like yourself or anything in that area. But it's pretty amazing when they do that.
Yeah.
I keep using the word amazing, but lacking for a better word. It's just.
So you began to gather these stories, and that's what led to It's All Good and God is at the End, preparing for a happy landing. What do you mean a happy landing?
Well, I used to work at No. 2 World Trade. We had an office on the 26th floor, and we moved out of the World Trade Center and moved over to Wall Street. And I remember on the day.
Were you in New York?
No. On that particular day, I was in Norfolk, Virginia. That particular day, but I remember that day just being horrified watching people jump out of the building, and talking with my friends in New York that saw people jumping out. And what really gave me concern was the one lady that did the sign of the cross when she was jumping. Obviously, she thought she was jumping into the arms of God. Mm-hmm. And I remember also a long time ago at the Ralt Center fire down in New Orleans, one of the reasons why now all buildings in Louisiana and across the country has sprinkler systems. This woman jumped out of the building, and she spoke at a church one time. I heard her in New Orleans, and she said, when she said, you cannot physically die from fire. She said, you can't allow fire to burn you up. She said it was either dying of the fire or jumping out of the building. And she said, I jumped out of the building. She said, but actually when I jumped out, the Lord appeared to her and said, it will be okay. And she lived. I think she had 18 broken bones or something like that. But So the happy landing is the people that jump out of these buildings. 9/11, you saw all the people that jumped out.
Yeah.
That's-
Didn't end so happy, at least on a bodily level for them. Where does the title come from? It's all good in God.
Well, I
at the end.
was doing one of my favorite things. I love to have an alcoholic beverage every now and then, and I was down in Biloxi, and I was talking to the bartender at the Hard Rock down there in Biloxi, and she said, "You sound like a preacher, but you're drinking." And so I was telling her about this book I was reading. She said, "So what you're telling me is like it's going to be all good, but God's at the end if I want it?" And I go, "You just gave me the title to
That's
my
the
book."
title to the book. So a bartender in Biloxi is responsible for the
That's
title
exactly
of your
right.
first book. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. What this is a book of stories, Artie, and I would imagine that each one of these stories has a great deal of meaning to you.
They do.
So I'm going to ask you, and by the way, 25% of the proceeds of this book, we should let people know, go to charities, which will actually help others. And so I think that's quite an important thing that we need to share. But this is probably an unfair question, Artie, because each one of these stories, it's probably like one of your children. But do you have a favorite child?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a guy, and I'm able to use his real name now. His name was Joe Walters. Joe Walters was an extraordinary person. Joe was a pilot during World War II. And to say this guy was courageous is an understatement.
Right.
This guy was unlike anybody you've ever met. He was a daredevil. And he used to say, "Man, when I was flying that plane, I was King Kong." Mm-hmm. And so I went to visit him. I was told that he requested someone from the church to go visit him. And I went there, and he didn't really like do-gooders. And he goes, "Are you one of these do-gooders?" So what he did, he told me all about, he said, "Have you ever watched someone burn to death?" So he was trying to scare the hell out of me.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I mean, he and I just were simpatico.
Yeah.
And so, he said, "I'm dying of something. I don't know what it is." But he lived quite a long time. But he would tell me these extraordinary stories. Like, for example, he was at the Nuremberg trials. Wow. That was pretty extraordinary. And he was not a man of great faith, but a man of growing faith. And one night they were bombing, I believe it was Dresden, Mardi Gras night. And they didn't think they would have any resistance at all because this was a non-military target. And he got hit as he was leaving Dresden, flying back to base. And his co-pilot was killed. And he said whenever the plane started shaking, that he cried out inadvertently, "Oh, oh God, oh God, oh God." And he said that he actually felt a presence come into the cockpit. And he said it calmed him down. He said some of the men were really losing it. And he was able to get the plane back to base. But what was extraordinary, Joe had become blind. And right before he died, he called me one day, and he was in a nursing home. And every day at 10 o'clock, they would ring a bell, because he was a late night guy.
Right.
And they would bring and put a little table and a cup of coffee there. And one morning, he was legally blind, and one morning, he sees these men standing at the foot of his bed. And they were in military uniforms. And he goes, "Well, I'm blind." He said, "Am I dead?" And they said, "Not yet."
Not yet.
And he said, "Which one of you guys is the guy that came to me the night that I cried out?" And this man stepped forward and he said, "It was me, sir. I'm your guardian angel."
Wow.
And you can imagine what my expression was like.
Wow.
Whoa.
It's all good, and God is at the end. Artie Cesario is sharing his stories with us. He's got a new book he's working on. We'll come back and tell you about that as Strategies for Living rolls on. Stay with us. More to come.
I'm Brandon Hughes, majoring in sound recording technology. I'm a freshman here at BIPSI, so this is my first time actually learning anything with Pro Tools and the recording part of the music. And this is fun because music is it's my passion, so it's always nice to wake up come to school and all you got to do is just work on music. I'm in sound system design right now, which is building studios, all the acoustic things with that. So I'll have the knowledge to, hopefully build my own studio and be able to work in that. Man, I'm learning everything in the business when it comes to labels, how they work, marketing of everything. I'm even learning about the press. It's like a family.
Hi, I'm Michael DeArmond, and I am a sophomore here at Bossier Parish Community College. I'm majoring in communications, and my experiences here at BIPSI has been an incredible experience. The staff, the students, just the things that I'm learning concerning audio and sound recording and film. It's an incredible way for me to go, and I think that if you chose to do communications here at Bossier Parish Community College, you would feel the same way that I do. If you were to come here to BIPSI to get a degree in communications, i.e. the sound and recording, then they have a wonderful recording facility here. They use the most advanced technical equipment that's involved, Pro Tools. All their editing equipment is awesome. The teachers are here on hand that are very knowledgeable in their field, and so it's just all wonderful experience for a young person or even a person of my age to come in. There's always something to learn that's new in the industry.
At what age is the color that your skin was meant to be no longer beautiful? Every year, millions of young women try to change the skin they were born with and say they'd die for darker skin. Sadly, some actually do. Melanoma is the second most common cancer in teens and young adults, and one person dies from melanoma every hour. Change your thinking, not your skin. Stop tanning. Learn more at spotskincancer.org. A message from the American Academy of Dermatology.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back into the television version of Strategies for Living. Of course, you're watching Strategies for Living right now, but you can listen to Strategies for Living right where we started 20 some odd years ago, Artie. Amazing. News Radio 710 Keel, Sunday mornings between 9:05 and 10. We are still at it. You can also find us at www.strategiesforliving.com and on Thursdays on healthylife.net. And today, Artie Cesario is our life strategist here on Strategies for Living. His book, it's a good one. You're going to want it. It's All Good and God is at the End, Preparing for a Happy Landing. Artie Cesario. You can find it from Outskirts Press. You can find it at barnesandnoble.com, or you can order it from amazon.com, but I hope you will order it. Okay, finish your story about Joe.
Well, one of the extraordinary things is that, like I said, he was blind. And he told that story, and then I said, Joe, look, you can't die without you telling me everything. Because he was starting to have...
You didn't allow him to die.
Oh, it was amazing, because he was having these ministering spirits coming to visit him.
And they told him one of them was his guardian,
he was guardian angel.
Okay.
And he was having people, and I never saw him really upset, but he told me, he said he was afraid that he would not see all his friends, and a spirit visited with him and said, don't worry, Joe, the people you knew that are in heaven, you'll be able to see them. Mm-hmm. The people that didn't make it to heaven, you won't even remember them.
Ah, okay.
Well,
taken care of then.
Well, what was extraordinary, he called me, and I said, Joe, if anything extraordinary happens, I want you to call me. So the lady from the nursing home called me and said, he wants you out here, chop, chop. So I dropped everything because I knew he had a story to tell me.
Right.
So I go out there, and he tells me that he had his routine. They brought the coffee to him at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And he said he was transported to a place that he had never seen the beauty. And this was a world traveler. He spent quite a bit of time around Lake Como and Switzerland, Italy, and so forth. So he was a world traveler. But he said you cannot articulate the beauty of this place. And he said there was a man standing by the waterside. And he said he couldn't describe how beautiful the water was. And Joe walks up to this man and says, are you fishing? What are you doing? And he said, I'm just enjoying God's creation here, Joe. And he said, well, how do you know my name? He said, Joe, I'm your father. And he said, that's bull manure. He said, you look about 19, 20 years old. He said, I'm 86 years old. And the man said, no, Joe, when you come up to God's heaven, you will be young again. You'll be King Kong. And he was amazed when he said King Kong, because he said that's something that he
That's
would
something
always...
that he would refer to himself
Right.
as.
But this is something I didn't put in the book, but this is something that just I
Now,
couldn't...
Joe's story's in the book.
Joe's story's in the book.
Okay.
But this is not in the book. Joe said, and when I saw my father, he said to say to you that AM says hello. And I lost the ability to speak, because AM was my father, who died when I was 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I never said that to Joe. I never talked about my father. And I went, whoa. So that's why my faith goes now to a knowing.
So it's
and
a
not
knowing,
belief.
not a faith.
Not
you know.
a faith, yeah.
Wow. So this has made, we could say, and I know you've been through some tough times, and so, but you have a knowing. This is a sustaining thing for you. There's a difference between a knowing and a faith. Tell me about the new book. We throw things at you.
Yeah, we throw things at you. It's what life metaphorically throws at you. I mean, what happened? I wrote the first book, and I could have put another book out very, very quickly because of all the stories, and
You
I
began
will.
to get the stories,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've got so many stories that people have called me with, but I want to show people that maybe I can be a writer, not just one trick pony about death and dying. So this is a story of 7 true short stories that I think should be told. As a matter of fact, I'm dedicating the book to Martha White, not the cornbread lady, but Martha White, the lady that, and I'm not trying to rewrite history, but Rosa Parks did a wonderful thing. But 2 years before what Rosa Parks did, Martha White did it, and was thrown in jail and beaten up and everything.
She was in Baton Rouge,
She was in Baton
Louisiana.
Rouge, that's right. And she actually inspired Rosa Parks. So,
Really?
yeah, so
So now we know, like Paul Harvey used to say,
the rest of the story, right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's amazing. And what's truly amazing, when I thought about this, that Mikhail Gorbachev was asked, what inspired him to go against communism? And he said, Lech Walesa. And then they asked Lech Walesa, what caused you to form Solidarity? And he said, I was inspired by Martin Luther King. And Martin Luther King was asked one time, who inspired him? And he said, by all means, Rosa Parks. So I got to thinking about that. Just think, Martha White, an unknown lady in Baton Rouge, her story needs to be told.
Because she influenced,
She
in a
influenced,
way,
and-
Martin Luther King, and
Just think, an unknown person in Baton Rouge could have stopped the Cold War.
right.
So when you think you have no significance in your life,
You don't know the ripple effect that here's this lady in Baton Rouge that stretched out and influenced years beyond Mikhail Gorbachev, and we know what happened from there.
that's right. But it's not just about her. It's 7 true short stories. These are true stories that hopefully will be inspiring, but also there's a love story. It's a true love story. I think it's a great love story. These people were married 57 years, and the woman was engaged to a physician, to marry a physician. But instead, she married a fisherman because she really was in love. And a situation occurred that she had to make a decision, and she chose love over money.
Over money.
You know?
When can we expect we throw things at you, these 7 stories,
Well,
to
I'm working
be
with
out?
I'm working with a local lady here, Melise Westmoreland. She's helping me edit the book and put it together, and hopefully it'll be in the bookstores by early summer.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
So
we're
pretty
excited.
quick, we'll have you back on in the fall, and we'll be talking about both books then.
We're
I
excited,
hope.
and we hope that that this book again will gain some traction. I believe it or not, I'm hearing from people in Belgium and in Singapore right now. There's
The book is literally sold all over the world.
all over the world, and it's amazing. There's not a week goes by that someone contacts me, and actually why I don't have a website is because I didn't have the time to maintain it. People were constantly contacting me from all over the world, wanting to tell me stories, and I've got a ton of them, and I'm realizing I'm not the only person that's had these extraordinary
No,
experiences.
because these stories, once once you get and I'm going to call this book, Artie, a catalyst book, because once you get bit, I told the story about Daniel Brinkley. I mean, once he's gone on to write 3 or 4 best-selling books of his own, as well as the volunteer work. You've done your thing. Once you get that seed planted, it's going to grow. So this is a catalyst book, and I'm sure we throw things at you will be one too.
Well, I'm hoping so. I'm hoping that it gets a market and people can identify with the stories. And also, you know, we're in tough times right now. There's some racial issues right now that we need to come to grips with. And
we're divided greatly.
Unfortunately, and one of the great things, one of the inspired stories in this book, my mother is going to be receiving an award on behalf of my grandfather from the Hicks Foundation, which is down in Bogalusa. And I don't know if you knew about them, but they formed the Deacons of Defense, and they work with James Farmer and so forth. Did a lot of wonderful things. But years ago, a young black man was put in peonage, or basically in slavery. Mm-hmm. And this woman came to my family and said, "Please, can you help get this man out?" And actually, the police were keeping this man, but we found out later that the police were actually off duty. And it was some individuals that had made some attempts to try to keep this man in slavery. And my grandfather and a few other men pretended they were revenuers, and they got sheriff's badges that you could get at a toy store, had them pounded and made a name for him, and went up and released this man, got it, scared the hell out of that man. And I often wondered what it was like for this man who had been held in peonage when he sees these white men in black suits dressed up like revenuers. What were they coming to do? And then when they finally, on the way home, let him know, saying, "Look, your mother and your sister sent us to get you out."
Congratulations to Mom.
Right.
And congratulations to you, Artie Cesario. Folks, you got to get this book. It's all good, and God is at the end. You and I want a happy landing, so this book will help you prepare you for one. OutskirtsPress.com, BarnesandNoble.com. Great place to get it, Amazon.com. It's all good, and God is at the end. Artie, thank you so much for coming and being on Strategies for Living again, and I can't wait for the new book to come out. Look for it, folks. We throw things at you. Artie Cesario. Folks, we throw a lot of things at you here at Strategies for Living, and I hope you'll continue to let us throw them at you. And so come back and join us whenever you can. Tune in to News Radio 710 Keel, Sunday mornings 9:05 to 10 for the radio edition of Strategies for Living, and at www.strategiesforliving.com. For Artie Cesario, I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan. I'll see you next time on Strategies for Living.